Sign these documents or get out. My husband sneered, waving a settlement agreement in my face in the house that I had paid for. He thought that throwing me out onto the street would break me completely. I just smiled, signed the papers, and simply walked away. A mere 12 hours later, his lawyer was screaming at him over the phone. "You idiot, do you have any idea what you've just done?" Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, grab a cup of your favorite tea and make yourselves comfortable. Sign these documents, Meredith, or get out. Stuart's voice didn't even waver. He was completely composed, cold, and laced with a terrifying, almost brazen confidence. He was sitting shamelessly in my own chair, my custom-made leather office chair that I had bought with my own first major bonus 5 years ago. He sat behind the mahogany desk that had been in my family for 2 generations. He looked almost comical, trying to assume a position of power in a room that screamed my name from every inch. Yet, there was absolutely nothing funny about the document he was sliding toward me across the gleaming wooden surface. It was exactly 7 a.m. The morning sun had just begun to pierce through the wooden blinds. I had just returned from my morning run, still dressed in leggings and a light jacket. I had expected to make myself a coffee and ease into my workday. Instead, I had walked straight into an ambush. "You can't be serious, Stuart," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I wasn't afraid. I was simply stunned by his boundless audacity. He smirked, leaning back comfortably in the chair and lacing his fingers behind his head. He was wearing that silk robe I had bought him for Christmas, the one that cost more than my first car. "I'm dead serious. Marriage is a partnership, Meredith. 50-50ths. But since you've been so pathologically difficult to work with lately and constantly made problems for my business ventures, I think it's high time we restructured our arrangement. This is a post-nuptial agreement. Under its terms, you relinquish your rights to this house to me and transfer a 50% controlling stake in your design firm. It's only fair compensation considering all the emotional support I've given you over the years." Emotional support. I wanted to burst out laughing. The man who had forgotten my birthday 3 years in a row and who called my career a charming little hobby, now dared to speak of any kind of support. "And if I don't sign?" I asked slowly, approaching the desk. "Then I file for divorce," he replied, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "And I promise you I will drag it out forever. I'll freeze your accounts and assets. I'll ruin your reputation in this city. My attorney, Lionel, says I have incredibly strong grounds for spousal support." He wasn't asking for security. He was committing open robbery. He was demanding the deed to a property my grandmother had left me in her will. He wanted the company I had built from the ground up, working hard every single day while he was off playing golf. I glanced down at the documents. They were clearly prepared in a hurry, probably by that cheap personal injury lawyer Stuart played poker with. Transfer of real property, assignment of partnership interest. The words blurred before my eyes. He truly believed he had me backed into a corner. He thought I was still the same woman who for 4 years had nodded her head and smiled meekly just to keep the peace at home. I looked at him, truly looked at him without any illusions. I noticed the graying hair at his temples, which I once found a sign of noble maturity, but which now just looked tired. I noticed the slackness around his jaw, the result of too much expensive whiskey and too little work. And I saw the absolute cruelty in his eyes. "All right, Stuart," I said quietly. "You win." His eyes widened in disbelief. He hadn't expected it to be so easy. I leaned over the desk. I didn't hesitate for a second. I signed my name, Meredith A. Blackwood, with a sweeping, confident flourish at the bottom of the last page. The ink was dark, thick, and irreversible. "Done," I said, capping the pen and placing it back on the desk with a distinct click. Stuart snatched the papers from my hands, scanning the signature. Finally, a look of absolute pure triumph spread across his face. "See, was that so hard?" "No," I answered calmly. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the house keys. I tossed them directly onto the mahogany desk. They landed with a heavy metallic thud. Then I raised my left hand. Slowly, I slid the platinum wedding band from my finger and placed it right next to the keys. "What are you doing?" Stuart asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "You said it yourself. Sign or get out." I signed. "Now I'm getting out." "Wait, you don't have to leave this second," he stammered. "We can have breakfast together. Celebrate our new understanding. Enjoy the house, Stuart. I said, turning on my heel. It's everything you ever wanted. I walked out of the study, down the long hallway lined with portraits of my ancestors and out the front door. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't look back. I simply got into my car, turned the key in the ignition and drove away. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror. Stuart was standing in the study window, pressing the signed documents against the glass and grinning like a man who had just hit the lottery jackpot. He had absolutely no idea that he had just signed his own death warrant. The door to the hotel suite clicked shut behind me, and the silence that followed was heavy, almost painful. I tossed my purse onto the marble table and walked slowly into the living room. The suite at the Bristol in Boston was impeccable, warm beige tones, fresh orchids, and a breathtaking view of the city skyline. Today, however, it all felt steeped in an icy chill. I sat on the edge of the velvet sofa and stared blankly at my own hands. Oddly, they weren't trembling. Why weren't they trembling at all? I had just left my entire home, my marriage, and theoretically my entire hard-earned fortune. I should have been hysterical. But no hysteria came. Instead, a deep, empty ache began to spread slowly in my chest. It was a painful mourning for lost time. For years. I had given that man 4 years of my life. Suddenly my phone vibrated. It was a notification from the smart home system. Motion detected. Living room. I shouldn't have looked. Despite myself, I picked up the phone and opened the app. Stuart was in the living room and he wasn't alone. He was pacing nervously with the phone to his ear, holding a glass of my best-aged whiskey. He looked absolutely ecstatic. I clicked the microphone icon to enable the audio. "I'm telling you, she just packed up and left." Stuart's voice sounded flat and shrill through the speaker. "Left the keys, the ring, everything. I told you, Lionel, she's weak. She couldn't handle the pressure. The house is mine. And the company? Yes, exactly. First thing tomorrow, I'm going to the office to introduce myself as the new co-owner. This thing is a gold mine and she's been running it like some kind of charity. No, she definitely won't fight it in court. I bet she's at her sister's place right now, crying into a pillow. She loves me too much to drag things through the courts. I have her exactly where I want her." I turned off the screen. My hand clenched around the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. She loves me too much. So that was his calculation. He had bet everything on the assumption that I was a desperate woman who would pay any price just to keep a husband by her side. He had deluded himself into thinking my dignity had a price, and that he had just bought it. At that moment, a new email notification appeared. It was from Kendra, my assistant. The subject line read, "Documents are ready." The body said, "Meredith, I've prepared all the files you requested. The forensic accountant finished the financial report at 4 a.m. You were absolutely right. It's much worse than we thought." I replied with a single word, "Wait." I sat back down on the sofa and closed my eyes, letting a wave of memories wash over me. I had to remember who that woman was before Stuart Wilson entered my life. I had to go back to the beginning, to that evening at the charity gala where he spilled red wine on my dress and then apologized with a smile that at the time seemed so incredibly charming. That was exactly 4 years ago. I was 48 at the time and had been single for over a decade. My young firm, Blackwood Design, had just won a massive contract. Professionally, I felt like I was on top of the world. Privately, however, I was terribly lonely. Coming home every night to an empty, enormous 6-bedroom house was starting to weigh heavily on my mind. That day, I was attending a gala for the Boston Children's Hospital. I was standing by the charity auction tables when a deep masculine voice sounded behind me. "You know, looking at that painting makes me feel like I urgently need glasses. And I assure you my eyesight is perfect." I turned around. The man was tall and the tuxedo fit him perfectly. He had the magnetism of a mature man's salt and pepper hair, a strong jawline and charming crow's feet around his eyes. "It's abstract expressionism," I replied, smiling politely. "It's meant to challenge our perspective. So far, it's mostly challenging my wallet." He laughed. "I'm Stuart Wilson. I'm in venture capital." I should have immediately asked what specific kind of investments he was involved in. I should have asked for a business card and checked his LinkedIn profile. But I did none of those things. I was simply utterly charmed. "Meredith Blackwood," I replied, extending my hand. "The Meredith Blackwood?" He raised his eyebrows in appreciation. The one who transformed that old historic granary on the Charles River into that incredible art gallery downtown? I'm a huge fan of your work. You have an unbelievable eye for form and structure. He knew my achievements perfectly. He complimented my intelligence and talent, not just my pretty dress. That was his first perfectly cast hook. We spent the rest of the evening in uninterrupted conversation. He was incredibly attentive, witty, and gave the impression of being very wealthy. He made me feel incredibly interesting. He made me feel truly seen. The next 3 months were a total whirlwind. Flowers delivered to my office every Monday morning. Weekend getaways to Cape Cod. Long romantic messages sent at midnight. He moved in with me in the 4th month of our relationship. He argued that it made perfect economic sense. I ignored every single red flag that appeared along the way because I so desperately wanted this beautiful illusion to be true. I couldn't see then that all the power and influence were solely on my side and he was just a parasite in all of this. And then he decided to introduce me to his family. That was the moment when the perfect illusion began to crack violently, revealing the horrifying rotten core underneath. If Stuart was a common leech, then his mother Lorraine and his sister Daria were the swamp from which this monster crawled. They came for a weekend visit that shamelessly stretched into a full month. Lorraine was a woman in her 70s who passionately wore tacky leopard print clothing. Daria, a woman in her 30s, was already a 2-time divorcee with a perpetual venomous grimace on her face. "Well, got to admit this is a pretty nice shack," Daria remarked without a hint of hesitation the moment she crossed the threshold. "It must be nice just inheriting an old family estate like this. Some of us have to work really hard to have anything." "I work very hard, Daria," I replied, forcing a fake smile. "I run a large, thriving company." "Oh right. All that interior decorating and picking out pillows." She sneered with contempt. They made themselves at home and from that moment on, my own private nightmare began. The refrigerator was brazenly plundered every night. My expensive specialized face creams regularly appeared in the guest bathroom half-used. One evening during dinner, the topic of money came straight to the table. "Stuart mentioned to me that you don't intend to help Daria in her current difficult situation," Lorraine said. "It ended with me buying Daria a used Honda for the sake of peace, just so they would pack their things and finally get out of there. I wrote the check and Stuart threw his arms around my neck, kissing me and repeating that I was the best and most wonderful wife in the whole world. But as I stood at the window and watched them finally drive away, I felt a very unpleasant cramp in my stomach. Something terrible dawned on me then. They didn't see me as a member of their family at all. They looked at me and saw only the perfect host on which they could shamelessly parasite, and Stuart had no intention of protecting me from all these parasites. The great breakthrough investment deal that Stuart constantly talked about never materialized. 6 months passed, then a whole year, and then another 2 years. Every time I gently brought up the topic of his contribution to the upkeep of our huge estate, he had a new excuse. I wanted so badly to believe him. Admitting to myself that my husband was a common shameless liar would mean that I had been a complete naive idiot. But the truth has a way of always surfacing, usually in the form of irrefutable documents. Everything came to light on a completely ordinary Tuesday. I had stayed home that day because I had a terrible cold. Stuart had left early in the morning, claiming he had an extremely important key negotiation. The mail came around noon. Usually, Stuart personally collected all the letters and packages. He had an absolute meticulous obsession with it. But that day he wasn't home. I began to sift through the stack of papers until suddenly I came across a thick official envelope from the bank. It was addressed directly to Stuart, but it concerned an account linked to the black credit card where I was the primary owner and payer. I took a letter opener and slit the top edge. I pulled out a stack of documents. The statement was 6 pages long. My eyes began to quickly scan the lines of text and my breath literally caught in my chest. Exclusive nightclub in Boston, over $5,000. Luxury suite at a hotel in Newport, another $7,000. Exclusive Rolex boutique, $14,000. First-class airline tickets for 2 to Miami, $14,000. The dates all didn't match his stories at all. The expense at the Newport Hotel was from the weekend when Stuart swore he was going on a silent spiritual retreat in the Berkshires. The bill for the luxury Rolex was issued exactly on my birthday when he had only given me a modest greeting card. And those airline tickets, 2 tickets to Miami for the upcoming weekend. I felt horribly nauseous. This wasn't the usual nausea from my cold. It was a deep, paralyzing nausea caused by total shock. Stuart walked into the kitchen, energetically loosening the knot of his tie. He looked cheerful. "Meredith, darling, I have fantastic news. That meeting was an absolute home run. We're talking about a massive cash injection as early as next quarter." He stopped abruptly mid-sentence as soon as he saw the documents lying on the counter. "What is this?" he asked, his confident smile starting to tremble slightly. "This," I replied, pointing my finger directly at the Rolex purchase entry, "is your powerful multi-million-dollar cash injection." "Who is this watch for, Stuart? Because I don't see it on my wrist." He froze. For a split second I saw pure unshielded panic on his face. But that moment of weakness passed in a flash, and his familiar mask immediately returned. "You opened my personal mail, Meredith. That's a federal offense. I'm the one who pays all these damn bills every month. Who are you with in Newport? Who are you flying to Miami with this weekend?" He calmly walked to the refrigerator, took out a bottle of water and began to drink slowly. "That Rolex is a capital investment. Meredith, I bought it at a discount solely to sell it for a big profit later. You have to invest money to make money. And Newport, well, that was just the bachelor party of a potential key client." "And the 2 tickets to Miami?" I threw in his face. "For my assistant," he replied smoothly. "I hired a virtual assistant to help me with all the logistics." "You don't have a company," I screamed. "You don't have any clients. You have absolutely nothing, Stuart. You're just a pathetic con man and a leech." His face instantly turned to ice. "Watch your words, Meredith. You're starting to sound like some unhinged fury." I couldn't sleep that night. I lay motionless in bed, staring at the dark ceiling and realizing with horror that the man sleeping behind the wall wasn't just lazy or irresponsible. He was something much worse. He was dangerous. He genuinely believed all his own lies. I had to find out at all costs who was supposed to occupy that second seat on the plane to Miami. I immediately hired a private detective, a Mr. Donovan. He was incredibly expensive, absolutely discreet and terrifyingly effective. I gave him all the details of Stuart's flight. 3 days later, Mr. Donovan sent me photos. In the foreground was Stuart, dressed in that expensive linen shirt I had bought him, laughing his head off at a hotel pool bar. And right next to him, draped over his arm like some cheap ornament, was a young woman. She couldn't have been more than 25. An attractive blonde with a perfect figure. Below was a short note from the detective. Subject is Tiffany Miller, age 24, personal trainer at a Boston gym franchise. Currently rents a studio apartment downtown, 3 months behind on rent. But the real blow to my heart was a video file. Mr. Donovan had managed to get close enough to their table during dinner with a hidden microphone. I put on my headphones. "She's getting so irritating, baby," Stuart's voice sounded. "Now she's accounting for literally every penny. And when are you finally going to leave her?" Tiffany's voice was high, shrill, and terribly whiny. "You promised you'd do it by summer at the latest. I can't just pack up and leave, Tiff. If I leave now, I'll be left with absolutely nothing. We signed a prenup, remember? I'll get a big fat zero. So, what are we going to do then?" "Well, break her," Stuart replied. His voice suddenly became terribly cold, almost sinister. "I'm already working on it. I'm going to make her life a living hell. My lawyer says that if I can prove she's mentally unstable, or if I can pressure her into signing a new property agreement that invalidates the old prenup, we'll be set for life. I just have to push her harder. Make her believe it's all her fault. If I threaten to leave her, she'll pay any price. And then this house will be ours. We'll have absolutely everything and we'll just throw the old hag out on the street." I ripped the headphones from my ears and threw them against the wall with all my might. Old hag. Break her. Pressure her. I was running out of air. For 4 years, I had been convinced that I was in a marriage with a man who was just a bit lazy and irresponsible. But this wasn't a marriage. It was planned predation. I wasn't a wife to him. I was only a target. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I saw tears streaming down my cheeks. But beneath those tears I saw something else. I saw the same strong woman who had built a business empire from scratch. Stuart thought I was weak. He was about to find out firsthand that this old hag knew exactly how to fight for what was hers. I wiped the tears from my face, picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in many years. Camila, I said as soon as I heard the voice on the other end. It's me, Meredith. I need you, and I need you to be the ruthless shark of a lawyer that legends are told about in this city. Meredith. Camila's voice was warm, but I immediately sensed a professional sharpness in it. Is everything all right? No, I replied, and my voice hardened like pure steel. My husband is trying to rob me of my entire fortune. I want to destroy him legally, financially, and completely. When can we meet? Camila was much more than just a divorce lawyer. She was a force of nature. I sat across from her, the entire detective's report along with a full transcript of the Miami recordings spread out on her glass desk. Camila read everything in absolute silence, circling certain fragments with a red pen. Finally, she looked up. This is an amateur, she stated mercilessly. A greedy, terribly stupid amateur. But amateurs can be extremely dangerous, precisely because they don't know the rules of the game. He wants me to sign a new property agreement, I said. Of course he does. Because under the current prenup, in the event of a divorce, he leaves this marriage exactly as he entered it, with his own clothes and whatever is in his personal bank account, which is a big fat zero. He desperately needs you to voluntarily transfer those assets to him. So I'll just tell him no, I noted. We could do that, Camila said. We could file for divorce today, citing adultery with irrefutable proof. You would win the case without blinking and he would be immediately thrown out of the house. But that's not enough for me, I interjected sharply. Camila, that man humiliated me in the worst possible way. He brought his shameless family into my home to rob me. He spent my hard-earned money on his girlfriend. He called me an old hag and cold-bloodedly planned to drive me insane. I don't just want a divorce. I want him to suffer. A wide smile appeared on Camila's face. It was a predatory, almost terrifying smile. I was hoping you'd say that. She pulled a thick folder from her desk drawer. Do you remember 2 years ago when we completely restructured your companies and assets? We transferred the entire estate and most of your liquid assets into the Blackwood Family Trust. Yes, I remember. And do you also remember that because Stuart was your husband, we needed his official notarized signature on a statement acknowledging that all these assets were going into the trust in which you are the sole and exclusive beneficiary? I remember he signed a whole stack of documents I put in front of him. He didn't even look at them. Exactly. Camila's eyes gleamed with excitement. He signed a notarized waiver of any and all claims against the trust's assets. In the simplest terms, he formally confirmed in the presence of a notary that the house and the company are the exclusive property of the family trust, not marital property. He has absolutely no rights to them. None. A revelation dawned on me. He's still convinced that the house is directly in my name. Now listen to the most beautiful part of our plan. If he now tries to make an official ownership claim against the assets of the family trust, knowing full well that he previously notarized a waiver, he is committing intentional property fraud. We have to make him follow through. We have to give him the space to officially demand the specific assets he has already relinquished. Bring me his new property agreement, I said, already seeing the outline of the whole plan in my head. It will list the house and my company in black and white. If you sign a document by which you transfer the house to him, Camila explained slowly, you are in reality transferring absolutely nothing because you as a private individual are not the owner of that house. The trust is the owner. His document will be worth exactly as much as a blank piece of paper, but he will be utterly convinced he's won the entire battle. He'll think he's hit the jackpot, I whispered. Confirmed, Camila said. And he'll immediately start to act. He'll try to take physical possession of the assets. Maybe he'll try to sell the house or take out a huge mortgage against it. And the very second he makes any attempt to exercise ownership rights over the trust property, we have him. And not just in a divorce case, but with a full criminal complaint for attempted fraud of high-value property, deception, and blackmail. I looked at the city skyline outside the window. It was an incredibly risky game. It required me to endure his vileness and cruelty for a little longer. But the vision of the look on his face when he finally realized how spectacularly he had screwed himself over was simply too beautiful to pass up. Prepare everything, I said decisively. I'm ready to play the role of a lifetime. The week leading up to the final ultimatum was without a doubt the longest and most exhausting week of my entire life. I had to live under the same roof with a man I despised from the bottom of my soul. I stopped wearing makeup. I allowed the house to become slightly messy. I deliberately left unpaid bills on the kitchen counter. "I'm just so terribly stressed, Stuart," I sobbed one evening. "I feel like I'm completely losing control of everything. Running the company is like black magic now, and this huge house requires far too much work." He soaked it all in like a sponge, muttering under his breath, "Maybe you just need to simplify your life, darling. Let me take at least some of this burden off you." In the meantime, I perfectly set the bait for him. I left a folder on my desk labeled, Asset Valuation 2024. Inside, I placed papers falsified by me and Camila, from which it was clear that the market value of our estate had risen to an astronomical $16 million, and that the company accounts held over $8 million in liquid cash reserves. I watched perfectly through the crack in the door as he nervously leafed through that folder. I watched his eyes widen with disbelief and greed as he scanned the numbers. He immediately pulled his phone out and started taking detailed pictures of every page. I watched perfectly through the crack in the door as he nervously leafed through that folder. I watched his eyes widen with disbelief and greed as he scanned the numbers. He immediately pulled his phone out and started taking detailed pictures of every page. "She's completely cracking," I heard him whisper excitedly on the phone a few hours later. "Her psyche is failing. She's talking about selling the company. I need those shares and the cash." Greed, I thought to myself, then robs people of their last remnants of reason. Finally, the evening before the planned ultimatum arrived. Stuart came home proudly holding his new leather briefcase. "We need to have a very serious talk tomorrow morning, Meredith," he said. "I've come to a conclusion on how we can finally fix all this." "All right," I replied, making my voice tremble as much as possible. "I'll do whatever you say, Stuart." The next morning, I unhesitatingly signed the papers. I quickly walked out of that house, leaving the keys and wedding ring on the desk. I drove straight to Camila's law firm. "He swallowed the hook, line, and sinker," I announced as soon as I crossed the threshold. "He signed?" she asked immediately. "He forced me to sign, and then he proudly put his own signature as the other party. All the documents are now in his possession." "Perfect." Camila picked up the phone. "I'm initiating the full eviction procedure this minute. I'm also sending a courier directly to the bank to officially block and freeze all your joint and personal accounts. And the house. He's sitting there right now, utterly convinced the entire property belongs only to him. Theoretically, and in the eyes of the law," Camila smiled predatorily, "that man is currently committing unlawful trespassing and is a common intruder on foreign territory. But let's give him at least this one night of his supposed glory. Let's let him throw his little victory party. The higher he rises in his sick fantasies, the more painful and hard his fall will be." I sat in complete darkness in my hotel suite, watching the nightmare unfold in real time on my phone. It was only 8 p.m. A mere 12 hours had passed since I closed the front door behind me. Stuart hadn't wasted a second. My living room was now packed to the brim with people. There were at least 20 people in my house, most of whom I had never seen before. They were probably Tiffany's friends or Stuart's buddies. The music was blasting so loudly that the bass literally shook the leaves of my ficus tree. But it was the sight of Stuart himself that made my blood run cold. He was standing brazenly on my coffee table, my unique table I had personally imported from Italy. He was wearing only the elegant trousers from his suit and a shirt unbuttoned halfway down his chest, holding a bottle of wine high in his hand. I zoomed in to see the label. It was a Chateau Margaux 1982, a bottle my late father had personally given me for my 40th birthday. That one bottle was worth nearly $100,000. And Stuart was brazenly pouring that liquid treasure into red plastic disposable cups. To a new chapter in life. Stuart roared at the top of his lungs. To taking from life what is legally ours. To being the true king of this castle. The crowd roared in approval. Tiffany stood right next to him wearing my silk kimono, that beautiful kimono I had bought on a trip to Kyoto. She looked completely drunk, grabbing a plastic cup of that precious wine and chugging it as if it were cheap beer. At that moment, Stuart pulled his phone out and started a live video on Facebook. "What's up, everyone?" he yelled. "I wanted to give you a quick tour of the new headquarters of Wilson Global Enterprises. Just look at this place. This is what happens when a man has a real vision and ambition. My ex, well, technically still my wife, she just didn't get it. But me, I'm a player. He pulled Tiffany in front of the camera. Say hello to the future, baby. Hi everyone, she squealed. We're going to redo the whole kitchen, right, Stewie? All this wooden furniture is so horribly old-fashioned. He was documenting his own demise with his own hands. He was creating public time-stamped evidence of his own blatant looting. Every sip of that expensive wine, every unauthorized guest destroying my property, every public claim of ownership was another nail driven deep into his legal coffin. I turned off the app. The rats were incredibly quick to turn on each other. I opened my laptop. In a perfect world, I would have waited until morning to begin this financial execution. But since Stuart wanted to play king of my castle tonight, fine. Let's see how the king intends to rule when his royal treasury turns out to be absolutely empty. I cracked my knuckles and opened the administrative panel to my entire life. It was time to turn out the lights. Step 1. Credit cards. I logged into the corporate banking portal and clicked on the black card assigned to Stuart. Status: active. Action: block and suspend. Reason for report: theft, loss of card. I clicked confirm. Status: suspended. Step 2. Joint checking and savings account. With one swift click, I transferred the entire available balance to my private savings account, leaving exactly $5 in that account. I left it only so he could see the horrifying gaping void with his own eyes. Step 3. The car. I dialed the premium customer support hotline for the leasing company. This is Meredith Blackwood. I'm calling about the lease agreement for the X5. I would like to officially report unauthorized use and misappropriation of the vehicle. Please initiate the repossession procedure and physically retrieve the vehicle immediately. The leasing company confirmed they could dispatch their repossession team within the next hour. Step 4. Utilities and home services. I logged into the cable TV and internet providers panel and terminated the contract. I changed all the streaming service passwords. I turned off the air conditioning. And finally, I opened the smart home control panel.